The morning of June 14th, 2018 dawned bright and serene over Jacksonville, Florida. The sun's early rays danced across perfectly manicured lawns, and the sleepy streets began to hum with the promise of another warm summer day. Inside a modest home on Willow Creek Drive, Clara Evans woke before her alarm, steeling herself for a difficult goodbye. Her husband, Daniel, was flying north for a business meeting. Their 8-year-old daughter, Emily, was to sleep over at Grandma Louise's. Clara wrapped Emily in a loose hug at the door, kissed Daniel on the cheek, and watched them drive off, oblivious to the tragedy that awaited. At 9:12 a.m., call logs show Clara dialed Daniel's cell for his final "I love you" before boarding. A fatigued hello came through. He'd hit unexpected turbulence on the short flight between Jacksonville and Atlanta. A chill traced Clara's spine. Turbulence? Over land? Planes rarely shook that hard on such routes. Her fingers trembled as she asked if he was safe. He laughed it off, assured her the plane was fine. But in her heart, a mother's intuition whispered worry. 2 hours later, everything changed. The television news cut into a cooking show with a somber speaker announcing Delta Flight 179 missing near Tallahassee. Clara's world shattered. Her hands flew to her mouth. Emily, playing dolls on the living room rug, looked up and tilted her head. Grandma Louise, standing behind Clara, grasped her daughter's shoulders. "It's okay, honey," she whispered, but Clara's scream ripped through the house before tears poured like rain. At the hospital, the waiting room was an ocean of grief-stricken faces. Passengers' relatives clung to coffee cups, each sip too cold to warm them. A Delta representative moved from group to group with the same rehearsed lines, "We're doing everything we can." Clara didn't hear him. She sank onto a plastic chair, head in her hands, as Emily tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, is Daddy okay?" Clara looked up, her face streaked with mascara. "They said your father, he's gone, honey." Emily's eyes went wide, confusion and fear mingling in her small frame. At 8, she had just learned what "gone" meant. Clara cradled her, murmuring broken promises that everything would be all right. But she knew, she feared, the cruel truth. The next hours blurred. The coroner's statement, the official confirmation of fatalities, the numbing handshake from a man in a sharp suit who said nothing more than "I'm sorry." Clara watched Emily absorb each new piece of information like a sponge, eyes brimming but strangely blank. At moments, the child would hug her mother fiercely. At others, she would stare out at the hospital courtyard, as though searching for something invisible. That evening, under the harsh glare of hospital lights, Clara's phone buzzed with messages from friends and family. "I'm here for you. Call if you need anything. Love you." Yet none could ease the pounding ache in her heart. She pressed Emily's pajamas to her face, inhaling the scent of fresh lavender that always calmed her daughter. "You're brave," she whispered, stroking Emily's hair. Emily looked up and nodded, tears silently tracing her cheeks. Late that night, after the hospital exhaled its last visitors and corridors emptied into haunted silence, Clara and Emily sat side by side on the edge of the bed in Grandma Louise's guest room. Emily clutched a stuffed rabbit, its one missing ear a testament to years of play. "Mom," she said in a tiny voice, "I'm scared I'll forget him." Clara closed her eyes, steadying the tremor in her voice. "You won't," she promised. "We'll keep his memory alive. Every laugh, every bedtime story. You'll never forget him." As Emily drifted into an uneasy sleep, Clara stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. Her own mind replayed the moment she'd learned her daughter was too young to understand grief, as a sympathetic doctor had told her earlier. Too young. How could anyone judge the depth of a child's capacity to feel? Clara vowed then that she would let Emily grieve on her own terms, and that she, Clara, would learn to listen. For now, the clock ticked away the hours, leading them both further from the world they once knew and into the long journey of mourning yet to come. The week that followed unfolded like a somber haze. Clara felt as though she were moving through thick fog, every step slow, weighted by disbelief. At Grandma Louise's house, the air was heavy with the scent of lilies and candle wax, a silent reminder of the rituals to come. In the living room, a folding table held stacks of condolence cards. On the walls, photographs of Daniel's bright smile gazed down as if urging them onward. Clara spent her days making arrangements, meeting with funeral directors in a small chapel draped in burgundy velvet, choosing caskets, selecting hymns she barely heard, signing paperwork that blurred before her eyes. At night, she lay next to Emily in the guest room, listening to her daughter's soft sobs until exhaustion claimed them both. On Thursday morning, the sky wept in slow, steady droplets. Rain smoothed the edges of the world into a muted watercolor. Clara and Emily stood beneath a black umbrella in the cemetery's rose garden. The wind whispered through the headstones, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and moss. Emily clung to her mother's hand, her small fingers trembling inside Clara's glove. A distant toll of the chapel bell summoned them. As they approached the open grave, Clara saw faces she hardly recognized. Neighbors from Willow Creek Drive, Daniel's colleagues in dark suits, distant cousins flown in from Ohio. Each person offered hugs laden with pity, murmurs of "I'm sorry" drifting on the wind. For Clara, each condolence deepened the ache in her chest. For Emily, it was a storm of confusion. They stood before the casket shaped like a cradle, white, as if meant for a child. Clara's throat tightened. Beside her, Emily's shoulders shook. Clara knelt and brushed a stray curl from Emily's forehead. "It's okay to cry," she whispered. "It's okay to be sad." Inside the chapel, sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting the walls in ruby and sapphire. The minister spoke of Daniel's kindness, his laughter, his unwavering devotion as a husband and father. Clara's heart pounded. With each syllable, memories crashed against her mind. Daniel teaching Emily to ride her bike, his gentle voice coaching her through homework, the way he tucked them both in every night. Emily stared at the minister, her wide eyes reflecting more than her years. When the service ended, the congregation filed out to the graveside. Clara lifted Emily into her arms. "Do you want to say something?" she asked. Emily's gaze drifted to the casket. For a moment, Clara feared she was too young, too fragile. But something quiet stirred behind Emily's tear-bright eyes. Clara set her down, and Emily stepped forward. "Daddy," she began, her voice soft but clear in the hush, "I miss you so much." The words trembled, yet they rang with fierce honesty. Heads turned, a hush settled over the mourners. Emily inhaled deeply. "I promise to keep your stories alive. I'll tell them to everyone. How you made pancakes, how you danced with me in the kitchen, how you tucked me in." A gentle breeze carried her words across the cemetery. Clara felt tears carve new paths down her cheeks. The minister nodded, his eyes glistening. Neighbors and cousins wept openly. Colleagues dabbed at their eyes. For a moment, grief united them all. After Emily's small eulogy, Clara took the podium. Her hands shook, but her voice found strength in her daughter's bravery. "Thank you, everyone, for loving Daniel and for loving us," she said. "He was the best father a child could have, and I promise to keep his memory alive, for Emily and for all of us who loved him." As the casket was lowered, a single ray of sunlight pierced the clouds, illuminating the fresh mound of earth. Clara squeezed Emily's hand, and together they scattered rose petals, Emily's tears mingling with the petals until the world seemed to glitter with both sorrow and remembrance. That evening, back at Grandma Louise's, Clara tucked Emily into bed. Emily held her rabbit tight, eyes fluttering. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think Daddy can hear me?" Clara pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "I know he can." And in the quiet darkness, mother and daughter found a fragile solace, that love endures beyond absence, and that a child's grief, no matter how young, is as deep and real as any ocean. The days after the funeral settled into a heavy, unspoken routine. Mornings began with the hollow sound of the alarm, followed by the silent shuffle of two bodies in bed. Emily would slip on her favorite pink sneakers, still pristine under the bed, while Clara stared into the bathroom mirror, tracing the dark circles under her eyes. Neither spoke of it. The grief was too vast for words. Grandma Louise took charge of meals and laundry, leaving Clara to handle the emails and insurance paperwork that piled up on the kitchen table. Each letter carried the Delta logo and bore phrases like dependent benefits or next steps, but the words blurred into meaningless shapes. The forms asked for things like proof of relationship and death certificate certified copy. Clara signed her own name so many times she felt as though she were becoming someone else, a faceless administrator in a bureaucratic nightmare. Emily's school tried to be supportive. The principal greeted her each morning with a gentle nod. Teachers offered worksheets stamped "Take your time," and counselors made themselves available for check-ins. But Emily shied away from their pity. At recess, she watched her classmates play tag and jump rope, her fingers clenched around the straps of her backpack. Each laugh reminded her of the happy mornings when Daniel dropped her off and ruffled her hair. At home, the silence was deafening. Clara moved through each room like a specter, avoiding the living room couch where Daniel used to sit and read the newspaper. In the kitchen, she couldn't bear to open the cabinet where his coffee mug waited, chipped at the handle still. So she poured her own tea in the chipped porcelain cup Emily once painted at summer camp. The chipped edge fit her thumb perfectly. Comfort in imperfection. One afternoon, while going through Daniel's closet, Clara discovered a leather-bound journal tucked behind his work shirts. On the cover, embossed initials D.E. shimmered under the fluorescent closet light. She hesitated for a moment, then opened it to the first page. The handwriting was neat, careful. June 1, 2018. Emily's birthday coming up. Got her the pink sneakers. Hope she loves them. Tears rose unbidden as Clara flipped through the pages. There were plans for family dinners, notes about mortgage payments, reminders to schedule Emily's dentist appointment, mundane details imbued now with heartbreaking normality. But then, midway through the journal, the entries grew more reflective. May 20, 2018. Feeling restless at work. This new project is exciting but stressful. Need to balance it with family time. June 12, 2018. Flight tomorrow. Hate being away from you and Em. Promise to call every hour. Clara closed the journal and pressed it to her chest. She sank to the floor, huddled against the painting of their family at the beach. The flood of words, her husband's voice in ink, pierced through the numbness. She realized that she had been pretending everything was fine, maintaining the silence because she didn't know how to speak the truth, that Daniel was gone and nothing would ever be fine again. That evening, Clara brought the journal to Emily's room. Her daughter sat on the floor coloring in a book, surrounded by crayons. Clara sat beside her, the journal resting on her lap. "I found something today," she said softly. Emily looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but curious. Clara opened the journal to a random page. "I thought Daddy would want you to read these," she told Emily. "He wrote about you all the time." Emily's small hand reached out to touch the pages. Together, they read about bedtime stories and school plays, about the way Daniel described Emily's laughter as music. With each sentence, Emily's posture changed. Her shoulders straightened, her lips trembled into a small smile. It was as if, through the journal, her father was speaking to her again. For the first time since the accident, words filled the silence. They read entry after entry, sharing tears and laughter. Emily's voice wavered as she read, "He said he wanted to teach me to ride a bike." Clara laid an arm around her daughter. "He will teach you," she said. "In every memory, every story, he's teaching you now." That night, Emily slept in Clara's arms, the journal clutched to her chest. Clara lay awake, listening to her daughter's steady breathing. The silence was no longer an abyss. It was a space they were beginning to fill, with memories, with stories, with truth. The weight of their shared grief had not lifted, but the journal had given them a voice, and in that voice lay the beginning of their healing. The morning sun filtered weakly through the curtains, painting soft amber patterns on the hardwood floor. Clara rose before Emily, her mind already drifting to the day's tasks: grocery shopping, insurance follow-ups, school pickup. It felt surreal to plan anything beyond the next breath. Yet routine, she decided, would be their anchor. In the kitchen, Clara placed 2 bowls of cereal on the table. Emily shuffled in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her pink pajama top was slightly inside out, and one sock was missing. But the sight of her daughter's sleepy smile brought Clara a measure of peace. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons and the humming refrigerator. "Mom," Emily said, her voice tentative, "will you help me practice spelling today?" Clara's heart fluttered. For weeks, Emily had shied away from homework, her pencil idle on the page. But now she was reaching for the workbook. "Of course," Clara replied, sliding in next to her daughter at the table. They worked through spelling lists, math problems, and a jumble of social studies terms. Whenever Emily stumbled, Clara offered encouragement. "You've got this," she would say, her tone warm and confident, though inside her heart wavered. Emily's focus sharpened the longer they worked. Clara saw her daughter not as the grieving child who had lost her father, but as the bright, determined girl she was. After the morning session, Grandpa Edward arrived. He'd driven down from Orlando, determined to help. His booming laugh filled the house as he helped Emily tie her shoes, 2 mismatched laces in a toddler's haste, and reminded Clara about upcoming deadlines. "Don't forget to submit Dad's forms by Friday," he said, leafing through a stack of papers, "and call the school counselor about those 2 absences." Clara nodded. "I know." She followed him into the living room, where he laid the documents on the coffee table. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." Edward placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Clara. We'll get through this, together." His voice was firm, a steadying presence she clung to. That afternoon, Clara and Emily took a walk to the nearby park. The air was warm with early summer heat, the sky a brilliant blue. Children's laughter echoed as they swung on monkey bars and chased soccer balls. Emily hesitated at the edge of the playground, watching other kids climb the jungle gym. Clara remembered the journal's entry. May 15th, 2018. Emily's first day at the playground. "She climbed to the top before I could catch my breath." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the little leather journal, now worn at the edges. "Daddy wrote something about this park," she told Emily. "He said it was your favorite place to explore." Emily's eyes lit up. "He did?" Clara nodded. "He said you pretended to be an astronaut, and you climbed so high he couldn't believe you were his daughter." Emily giggled, her shoulders relaxing. "I did that?" "Yes," Clara smiled. "I thought you might want to climb." With a determined nod, Emily sprinted toward the jungle gym. Clara followed, heart pounding. Her daughter scaled the bars with surprising agility, her small hands gripping the metal. At the top, Emily stretched out her arms and laughed, free and unburdened. Clara stood below, tears glistening as she watched her daughter embrace a piece of her father's memory. Later that evening, back at home, Clara prepared dinner while Emily drew at the kitchen table. The walls were now dotted with Emily's artwork. Rainbows and scribbled family portraits with 3 figures, 2 large, 1 small, handed to Grandma Louise to hang on the refrigerator. "Mom," Emily said, glimpse of seriousness in her eyes, "can we make a memory box?" A memory box? Clara felt the idea take root in her chest like a seed of hope. "Absolutely," she replied. "Let's do it tomorrow." That night, Clara sat alone in the living room, the house silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. She opened Daniel's journal again, reading late entries that spoke of future vacations, school recitals, and bedtime stories he looked forward to telling. She underlined passages and copied them onto index cards. With each card, her determination grew. She would build that memory box, not just for Emily, but for herself, a place to hold the echoes of the everyday moments that defined their family. And as she placed the cards into a small shoebox, she realized that in honoring the mundane, breakfasts, spelling tests, playground adventures, they were truly honoring Daniel's legacy. In those quiet rituals of life, love endured. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, as if the world were offering a momentary reprieve from sorrow. Clara and Emily gathered in the living room, armed with a plain wooden shoebox, a stack of index cards, colorful markers, ribbon, and a handful of small mementos. A chipped coffee mug, a pink sneaker, a seashell from their last beach trip. Grandma Louise hovered nearby, ready with extra glue and a reassuring smile. "First," Clara said, smoothing the lid of the shoebox on her lap, "we need a name for our box." She glanced at Emily, whose eyes sparkled with anticipation. "What do you think?" Emily tapped her finger against her chin. "How about Our Daddy's Time Capsule?" Clara's chest tightened with emotion. "Perfect." She wrote the words in pearly letters on a folded index card and taped it to the front of the box. Together, they tied a pale blue ribbon around it, Daniel's favorite color. Next came the stories. Clara read aloud the passages she had copied from Daniel's journal, the entry about Emily's first day of preschool, the note about cheering her on at her soccer match, the promise to read her every night. Emily listened, enraptured, her small hand resting against her mother's arm. Each card they placed inside became a tangible piece of her father's love, preserved against the tide of time. Between readings, they inserted photographs. Daniel tossing Emily into the air at the county fair, him teaching her to swim in the backyard pool, the 3 of them entwined in beach blankets as the sun set behind them. The shoebox began to bulge with memories, a mosaic of laughter and warmth. As they worked, Emily spoke softly. "Mom, I want to write something too." She took a blank card and, with careful strokes, wrote in her best handwriting, "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for making me brave." Clara's throat tightened as she helped her daughter slip the card into the box. By midday, the box was nearly full. Grandma Louise suggested adding small items with sensory connections: a vial of sand from the beach, a sprig of lavender, a recording of Emily's laughter. Clara set up her phone and captured Emily telling her favorite knock-knock joke. "Knock knock, who's there?" "Olive." "Olive who?" "Olive you, Daddy." Emily giggled and Clara pressed record, immortalizing the moment. When the tape beeped done, they taped the tiny SD card inside a plastic sleeve and secured it to the bottom of the box. They arranged the lavender sprig under the lid so that, whenever they opened it, the scent would rise and envelop them. At last, they stepped back and surveyed their creation. The wooden box, once plain and unassuming, now brimmed with life and love. Written words, photographs, souvenirs, and the faint fragrance of lavender. It was no longer just a container. It was a living memorial, destined to bind the past and the future. Emily placed her hand over the lid and closed her eyes. "Can we open it later when I miss him?" Clara knelt beside her daughter and pulled her close. "Yes, sweetheart. Whenever you need him, he's right here." She tapped her heart. "And in here." Grandma Louise wiped a tear from her eye. "You two did something beautiful today." Late that night, Clara tucked Emily into bed and kissed the top of her head. Emily's eyelids fluttered as she drifted into sleep, her breathing steady and calm. Clara tiptoed into the hallway, carrying the memory box cradled in her arms. In the guest room, she placed it on the bookshelf next to Daniel's journal. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened the lid, inhaling the lavender. Under the soft glow of the bedside lamp, she reread a card. May 20, 2018. Feeling restless at work, need to balance it with family time. She closed her eyes and let the words wash over her, feeling her husband's presence as surely as if he were beside her. In that quiet moment, Clara realized that grief would always live alongside them, but they now possessed a sanctuary, a treasure of memories to sustain them through the loneliest nights. The box was more than wood and ribbon. It was proof that love endures far beyond absence, woven into the fabric of everyday life. As she replaced the lid and turned out the light, Clara whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Daniel, for every day we had." And somewhere in the stillness, she felt him there. The morning light inched through the curtains, casting soft gold across the little guest room where Clara and Emily still slept together. It was the first time in weeks they'd awoken without the weight of immediate sorrow pressing on their chests. Clara lay watching her daughter's steady breathing, resolve growing in her heart. Today would be their first true step forward. After a simple breakfast of toast and fruit, Clara gently coaxed Emily to put on her sneakers. "Remember how Daddy taught you to tie them?" she asked, holding out the laces. Emily looked down at the memory box memento pinned on the bookshelf, their treasure of stories, photographs, and tokens, and took a deep breath. "I can do it," she whispered, looping the laces into a perfect bow. Clara smiled through tears, proud and hopeful. They headed toward the garage, where a bright red bicycle with training wheels stood waiting. Daniel had brought it home just weeks before his trip, confident that Emily would love it. Now it glinted in the morning sun, a symbol of freedom and growth. Emily placed her hands on the handlebars, and Clara steadied the seat behind her. "Ready?" Clara asked. Emily nodded, her small face determined. "Ready." Clara gave a gentle push, and Emily wobbled forward, squealing with delight. For the first few feet, Clara ran alongside, hand on the seat. But as Emily gained confidence, Clara let go. Emily's laughter rang out, bright and clear, as she pedaled on her own. The training wheel steadied her, but it was her own effort, her courage that made her move. Clara stood on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched Emily circle the driveway. Each rotation carried them both further from their grief, propelled by memory and love. When Emily finally stopped and skidded to a halt, she threw her arms around her mother. "I did it, Mom! I really did it!" Clara hugged her tight. "You did, just like Daddy taught you." They spent the rest of the morning practicing together. Clara ran beside Emily, offering gentle corrections and bursts of praise. Neighbors waved from their lawns, and a few stopped to congratulate the pair. Emily beamed at every word of encouragement, as if each compliment stitched a small patch in her healing heart. After lunch, Clara suggested they visit the public library, another of Daniel's favorite places. He had been proud of his daughter's love for stories and had often taken her to the colorful children's section. Now, in his absence, Clara wanted to carry on that tradition. Inside the library, the familiar scent of polished wood and old pages greeted them. Emily raced to the low shelves where fairy tales and picture books beckoned. She pulled out a copy of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, its cover vibrant with illustration. Clara settled into a nearby armchair, the memory journal tucked under her arm. They spent the afternoon reading together, alternating chapters. Emily's voice grew more animated with each page, her imagination transporting them to fantastical worlds. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, envisioning Daniel leaning back in this very chair, listening to their shared laughter. Before leaving, they wrote their own short story on a bookmark. A brave girl named Emily travels through Wonderland with her guardian angel, her loving father. They slipped the bookmark into the book, a silent promise to return. Back at home, the memory box awaited them in the living room. Clara opened it and pulled out the card Emily had written. "Thank you for making me brave." She read it aloud, and Emily traced the words with her finger. "I'm brave," she said softly. "Yes," Clara agreed, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "Daddy helped you be brave, and we'll keep being brave together." That evening, as they prepared for bed, Clara tucked Daniel's journal under her pillow. Emily squeezed her rabbit tight and whispered good night to her father, as she did each night. Clara watched her daughter's peaceful face and felt a warmth bloom in her chest. It had been a day of small victories, a bicycle ride, a shared story, a whispered promise. In the routines Daniel had loved, learning, exploring, remembering, they had found a way to honor the past while stepping into the future. And though the ache of loss would never vanish completely, Clara knew that with each brave step forward, they were building a life in which grief and joy could coexist side by side. The sun was dipping low in the sky, casting long shadows across the Evans' living room when Clara realized how quiet the house truly was. After weeks of chatter, phones buzzing with condolences, friends dropping off casseroles, Grandma Louise offering gentle reassurances, silence had settled like dust on every surface. Tonight, it felt suffocating. Emily sat at the small wooden table near the bay window, coloring intently in a fresh sketchbook. The crayon's soft hiss against the paper echoed in the empty room. On the opposite side of the table, an empty chair stood, as it always had, Daniel's favorite spot, where he would have supervised homework or sipped his evening tea. Clara paused at the entryway, her hand hovering on the doorframe. Her heart ached at the sight. 3 chairs, but only 2 occupied. Taking a slow breath, Clara crossed to the kitchen and gathered 2 mugs. She measured fragrant chamomile tea into each, watching the steam curl upward in delicate spirals. For a moment, she considered pouring a 3rd cup for Daniel, but the ache in her chest tightened. Instead, she carried the 2 mugs to the table, placing one in front of Emily and the other on the chair next to her. Emily looked up from her drawing, puzzled. "Mom, why did you put tea there?" Clara forced a small smile. "I thought if Daddy were here, he'd want some tea too." Her voice trembled, but she lifted her chin. "Maybe we can pretend he's here for a minute." Emily's eyes glistened. She set down her crayon and reached across the table, placing her small hand on her mother's. "Okay." They sat in companionable silence, sipping their tea. Clara closed her eyes and imagined Daniel's warm laugh, his easy smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he found something amusing. Across the table, she sensed Emily doing the same, her chest rising and falling with the weight of 1,000 unspoken memories. Breaking the silence, Clara said softly, "Do you remember when Daddy taught you how to make tea for Grandma?" Emily nodded, a smile curving her lips. "He showed me how to hold the kettle just right so I wouldn't burn my hand." Her gaze drifted to the empty chair. "He always did it perfectly." Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "He did, And you helped him too. You held the timer and mixed the honey. Emily giggled, recalling the sticky sweetness of honey clinging to her fingers. I got it everywhere. They both laughed through their tears, the kind of bittersweet release that felt like both balm and salt in the wound. After a few moments, Clara set her mug down and reached toward the memory box resting on the shelf nearby. She lifted the lid and withdrew a laminated photograph of Daniel and Emily at the county fair, grinning as they devoured cotton candy. "Why don't we make a new memory here?" she suggested, pointing to the photo. "Let's draw that day." Emily's eyes brightened. She grabbed colored pencils and placed the photo in the center of her sketchbook. Together, they recreated the scene. The Ferris wheel spinning in the background, the cotton candy fluffy and pink, their faces wide with delight. As they drew, the room felt warmer, as if Daniel's spirit had slipped inside the walls to sit with them again. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, their masterpiece was complete. Clara held Emily's drawing beside her own tea mug. "I think he'd love this," she said, voice thick with emotion. Emily nodded solemnly. He would. Later, after tucking Emily into bed and listening to her daughter's soft breathing, Clara returned to the living room. She moved the mugs to the sink and took the empty chair in her hand, turning it slightly toward the center of the room. Then, in a quiet ritual, she draped Daniel's favorite navy throw over the backrest. The chair, once simply an object of daily use, had transformed into a presence in itself, a place reserved for memory, for conversation, for tea shared across the table. Clara sat down and leaned back, feeling the soft fabric against her spine. She closed her eyes and whispered into the hush, "Good night, Daniel." In the silence that followed, she no longer felt the chair as empty, but as open, waiting to hold him again in their memories and their hearts. The early morning dew clung to every blade of grass as Clara pushed open the back gate and led Emily into the garden Daniel had lovingly tended. Rows of marigolds, petunias, and daisies swayed gently in the breeze, their colors muted by the soft gray of dawn. In the center of the yard stood the old oak bench where Daniel often sat, notebook in hand, planning his next weekend project. Now, it awaited two visitors seeking comfort among the blooms. "Mom," Emily whispered, stepping barefoot onto the damp earth, "the flowers look so peaceful here." She knelt beside a cluster of bright yellow marigolds, inhaling their earthy scent. Clara crouched beside her and wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "This was Daddy's favorite spot," she said softly. "He said the flowers reminded him that life always finds a way to grow, even after the harshest winters." She brushed a strand of damp hair from Emily's brow. "Today, I thought we could plant something new, something just for you and Daddy." Emily's eyes widened with curiosity. Like what? Clara reached into a small wooden box she'd brought from the shed, a collection of seed packets and tiny garden tools. She handed Emily a packet of sunflower seeds, their smooth brown husks promising tall golden blooms. "Sunflowers," Clara explained, "because they always follow the sun, no matter where it is. They turn their faces toward the light." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Just like we have to do." Emily nodded, determination in her expression. Together, they knelt on the soft soil and dug small holes with a trowel. Clara guided Emily's hands as she dropped 3 seeds into the earth, covering them gently with soil and patting the ground smooth. When they finished, they placed 3 flat stones as markers, each painted with one of Daniel's favorite colors: deep blue, forest green, and sunny yellow. As they worked, memories surfaced like buried treasures. Clara recalled the Saturday mornings when Daniel would coax Emily into helping him plant herbs in small pots on the windowsill. She remembered how he praised her careful hands and encouraged her to water each plant just enough, never too much, never too little. Every seed they planted together had become a living testament to his patience and his belief in nurturing growth. When they finally stood, brushes of dirt on their knees and smiles touching their lips, Emily stretched her arms wide. "He would have loved this," she said, gazing at the markers. Clara knelt beside her daughter and wrapped her in a gentle hug. "Yes, he would have," she whispered. "And every time these sunflowers grow, we'll remember that he's with us, helping us turn toward the light." They spent the rest of the morning weeding the flower beds and trimming the rose bushes. Grandma Louise emerged from the kitchen with cold lemonade in mason jars, her apron flecked with flour from morning baking. She settled onto the oak bench, watching the pair work with pride. "You two make a good team," she said, handing Clara a jar. "Daniel would be so proud." Clara accepted the lemonade and took a slow sip, savoring the sweetness. She glanced at Emily, whose cheeks were dusted with dirt and whose eyes shone with accomplishment. In that moment, she recognized how far they'd come, from the numb shock of loss to this deliberate act of renewal. After lunch, they retreated indoors. Emily insisted on reading aloud from the little garden guide Daniel had left beside the bench last fall. Her voice, once quiet and hesitant, grew stronger with each botanical fact she shared. How to thin seedlings, how to recognize pests, the names of different pollinators. Clara listened with a swelling pride, realizing that Emily's bond with her father lived on in the knowledge he passed to her, piece by piece. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blazed in pink and orange hues, Clara led Emily back into the garden. The air was warmer now, and the soil around the newly planted seeds looked rich and inviting. They stood side by side, watching the world settle into twilight. "Let's promise something," Clara said, squeezing Emily's hand. "Each morning, we'll come out here and say good morning to Daddy, right here, by the bench, and say good night each evening. We'll tell him about our day, about what we're grateful for, and what we hope to grow next." Emily nodded, eyes bright. She leaned forward and pressed her cheek against the oak bench, as if laying her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Good morning, Daddy," she whispered softly. "We planted sunflowers today. I can't wait to see them grow." Clara took a deep breath and closed her eyes. "Good morning, Daniel," she echoed, her voice thick with love. "We miss you, but we're finding new joy in your garden. Thank you for teaching us how to grow." The garden was silent except for the rustling leaves, but in that stillness, mother and daughter felt a presence. A reminder that life, like the flowers they tended, could bloom again when rooted in love and memory. As they turned to head back inside, Emily looked up at Clara and smiled. "I think he heard us." Clara squeezed her daughter's hand. "I think he did, sweetheart." The first Monday morning of autumn arrived with a crisp chill in the air. Golden leaves floated down the driveway as Clara and Emily prepared for the day. It felt like the world had shifted beneath their feet, but today they would step into it anyway. Clara stood in Emily's bedroom doorway, watching her daughter choose her clothes. Emily selected a blue cardigan, Daniel's favorite color, and slipped on a skirt covered in tiny sunflowers. Clara's heart warmed. Her little girl was carrying pieces of her father with her into the day. "Ready for your first day back at school?" Clara asked, brushing a stray lock of hair from Emily's face. Emily nodded, her grip tightening on the straps of her backpack. "I'm nervous, Mom." Clara knelt and held her daughter's face gently. "It's okay to be nervous. Just remember how brave you are. And if you ever feel scared, talk to Mrs. Bryant. And remember to carry Daddy's stone." She pointed to the smooth river rock Emily kept in her pocket, one of the stones from the garden markers they'd painted together. "He's right there with you." Emily slipped the stone into her palm and smiled. "Okay, I can do this." At the school parking lot, Clara walked Emily to the entrance. Kids burst through the doors in a flurry of laughter and backpacks. For a moment, Emily faltered, her feet rooted to the pavement. Clara knelt again and hugged her daughter close. "I love you," she whispered. "See you after school." Emily inhaled, squared her shoulders, and stepped through the doors. Clara watched her go, chest tight but proud. She lifted her phone and turned away, blinking back tears before returning to the car. Clara's day was filled with errands and quiet moments. She visited the bakery for pastries, sat in the park with Daniel's journal, and even managed a brief phone call with her boss, tentatively negotiating a part-time return to work. The world moved around her, full of obligations and noise, yet she felt a fragile strength taking root inside her. At 3:15 p.m., Clara arrived back at the school. The dismissal bell rang and children poured into the courtyard. Emily emerged at the head of her class, her cardigan still buttoned to the top. Clara rushed forward. "How was it?" she asked as they walked to the car. Emily's eyes brightened. "Good. I read my story to the class." Clara raised her eyebrows. "You read a story?" Emily nodded, her cheeks flushing with pride. "Yes, Mrs. Bryant asked us to write about someone important to us. I wrote about Daddy. I told them how he taught me to ride my bike, how he made tea, how he planted sunflowers. Everyone listened quietly. Then Mia Dawson said it was the best story she'd ever heard. And Tommy asked if he could plant sunflowers too." Clara's throat tightened. "Emily, that's wonderful." Emily grinned. "It felt good, Mom. I felt like he was there." She pressed her hand against her cardan pocket where the river stone rested. Back home, Clara and Emily settled into their evening routine. Over pasta and salad, they talked about the day's highlights. Emily's story presentation, her classmates' questions, the way the sun shone through the classroom windows. Clara let herself bask in the glow of her daughter's accomplishment. After dinner, Clara suggested they visit the memory box. Emily retrieved the wooden shoebox from the bookshelf and placed it on the coffee table. Together, they added a new token. Emily's story printed from the school computer, trimmed to fit on a card, and sealed in a clear sleeve. They slipped it into the box beside the lavender sachet and the photo of the county fair. "We're making the box grow," Emily said, sliding the lid closed. Clara nodded, and so are we. Later, when Emily was tucked in bed, Clara sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She navigated to the airline's website, the one that had organized the memorial fund for Delta Flight 179's victims. Nervous butterflies fluttered in her stomach as she composed an email. "Dear Flight 179 Memorial Committee, my name is Clara Evans, and I am writing on behalf of my daughter, Emily. We would like to request permission to plant sunflowers at the Flight 179 Memorial Garden in Tallahassee as a symbol of hope and renewal. Emily has already planted seeds in our backyard and would be honored to add them to the official garden. Thank you for your consideration." Her fingers hovered over the send button. She pictured Daniel's encouraging smile and clicked. Almost immediately, she received an automated acknowledgement, followed, minutes later, by a personal note from the committee coordinator welcoming their contribution and offering to reserve a plot for their sunflowers. Clara exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. She felt a surge of connection, not only to her daughter's healing, but to a larger community forging meaning from tragedy. Tonight, they were more than survivors. They were sowers of hope. As she closed her laptop, Clara realized that returning to the world wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about carrying it forward, transformed by love and purpose. And as she switched off the lamp and slid into bed, she felt the gentle weight of her daughter's riverstone in her pocket, a reminder that grief and courage could coexist, guiding them toward new beginnings. The morning of October 14, 2018, dawned crisp and clear over Tallahassee. Clara and Emily woke early at the small guest house provided by the Memorial Committee, its facade painted in soft blues and whites, echoing the colors of the sky above. Outside, the air carried a hint of autumn, dry and cool, and Emily pressed her palm to the window, watching golden leaves drift past on the breeze. Clad in matching denim jackets and scarves, Clara and Emily drove to the Flight 179 Memorial Garden, a tranquil oasis nestled near the edge of Lake Bradford. The winding path was lined with bench markers bearing the names of the 40 souls lost in the accident. As they approached the central plaza, an open courtyard paved with engraved stones, they saw other families gathered in small clusters, clutching pots of sunflowers, marigolds, and pansies. Some faces were unfamiliar, others belonged to neighbors from Jacksonville, survivors' families who had become a close-knit community in the weeks since the tragedy. A gentle hum of whispered greetings filled the air. Children played quietly along the pathway, trailing butterfly-shaped wind chimes that tinkled softly whenever a breeze passed through. Volunteers in bright green vests stood ready with gardening tools, watering cans, and trays of seedlings. At the center of the courtyard, a curved stone wall displayed a memorial plaque etched with Flight 179's flight path, its wings arcing across the horizon as if still in flight. Clara took Emily's hand and led her to a reserved plot at the garden's periphery, marked with a brass plaque bearing their family name, Evans. The soil had been freshly turned, dark and fertile, waiting to receive new life. Emily knelt beside the earth, her cheeks flushed with anticipation, and brushed away stray leaves. She retrieved the 3 painted stones they had placed by the sunflowers back home, blue, green, and yellow, and arranged them in a small triangle at the head of the plot.
"Mom," Emily whispered, her voice hushed with reverence, "this feels like it's really becoming his garden." Clara knelt beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "It is, sweetheart. This garden holds all our memories, and each flower we plant helps them grow." A soft voice interrupted their moment. It was Mrs. Ramirez, the memorial committee coordinator, holding a wide-mouthed terracotta pot brimming with plump sunflower seedlings. The leaves were glossy, the stems sturdy, as though prepared for a grand unveiling. Next to her stood a volunteer with gardening gloves and a trowel. "Are you ready?" Mrs. Ramirez asked gently. Emily nodded, her eyes bright. "Yes." With the volunteers' help, they transferred the seedlings into the soil, planting them 3 paces apart. Emily lowered each young plant and covered its roots with a light layer of soil, patting it down thoughtfully. Clara poured water from a galvanized can, the droplets seeping into the earth around the plants. As they worked, families from other plots joined in the ceremony. A father and son planted blue hydrangeas. A mother and daughter knelt over purple pansies. A small group of college friends set marigolds in neat rows. Each family paused to read aloud the names on nearby plaques, offering silent nods of remembrance. The collective act of planting wove their individual stories into a tapestry of shared resilience. When all the sunflowers were in place, Mrs. Ramirez invited everyone to join at the central plaza for a brief dedication. A gentle hush fell as the breeze carried the scent of fresh soil and fallen leaves. Clara lifted Emily onto a small podium beside the memorial plaque, and with a trembling but determined voice, Emily addressed the gathering. "Daddy, I planted these sunflowers for you," she began, her gaze lifting toward the sky. "They will grow tall and bright, following the light, just like you taught me. I want these flowers to remind everyone that even after something awful happens, we can find a way to keep growing toward hope." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Some wiped tears, others clasped hands. Clara felt her heart swell with pride. Here, in this circle of remembrance, Emily's words had become a beacon of healing for dozens of families. After the dedication, volunteers passed around hot apple cider and pumpkin muffins. Neighbors from Jacksonville recognized Clara and approached to offer comfort and congratulations. One woman, whose husband had been on the flight, embraced her. "Your daughter's words gave me courage," she said. "Thank you."
Back at their plot, Clara and Emily lingered until the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the garden. Emily placed her small hand over the headstone marker and whispered, "Good night, Daddy," and Clara echoed, "Good night." In the fading light, the first of the sunflowers fluttered in the breeze, their tiny heads swaying gently. Clara squeezed Emily's hand and realized that, like those sunflowers, they too would face each new day toward the light, rooted in memories, nourished by community, and reaching ever upward. As they walked back to the car, Emily looked up at Clara. "Mom, I think Daddy would be so proud of us." Clara smiled, brushing a stray leaf from Emily's hair. "I know he is, sweetheart. I know he is." Sunlight filtered through the living room drapes in soft shafts as Clara tapped her foot nervously on the worn hardwood floor. Today marked 1 year since Delta Flight 179 disappeared from the Jacksonville-Atlanta route and claimed 40 lives, including Daniel's. The calendar on the wall circled October 15, 2019, in vivid red ink, a stark reminder that grief, like the ocean tides, returns in predictable cycles. Clara glanced across the room at Emily, now 9 years old and blossoming into her father's confident child. Emily's pink cardigan, embroidered with tiny sunflowers, hung on the back of the sofa. Underneath sat her journal, opened to a blank page bearing the date, October 15, 2019, "My first anniversary without you." Clara drew in a trembling breath and walked over to her daughter's room. Emily sat at the small desk by the window, her back straight, pencil poised over the empty page. Tears shone in her blue eyes, but her chin was lifted, her shoulders squared. Clara's heart swelled with pride and sorrow. "Hey, sweetheart," Clara whispered, kneeling beside her. "Are you ready?" Emily nodded without looking up. "I want to write to him again. Tell him about my year." Clara rested her hand on Emily's shoulder. "That's beautiful. I'll be in the living room if you need me." As Clara retreated, she felt the weight of the day settling around her like a cloak. In the kitchen, she brewed chamomile tea, 2 mugs, as always, and arranged them on a tray alongside freshly baked sunflower muffins. She placed a small brass candle holder, donated by the Memorial Garden Committee, in the center. Its single white taper was carved with Flight 179's emblem, a soaring wing etched in silver. By mid-morning, neighbors and friends began to arrive. Mrs. Ramirez, the memorial coordinator, brought a framed photograph of the memorial garden's first bloom, a cluster of towering sunflowers that had stood sentinel over the plaque bearing Daniel's name. Other families arrived, each bearing tokens of remembrance: a scrapbook of letters, pressed flowers, homemade quilts stitched with names and dates. Though some faces were etched with fresh pain, many wore expressions of calm acceptance, the quiet strength born of communal mourning. Clara welcomed them in her living room, where sunlight pooled around the candle holder. Each guest found a seat on the sofas or folding chairs placed in a semicircle. Emily lingered at the doorway, clutching her journal. Clara eased the tray of tea and muffins onto the coffee table, the aroma of honey dough mingling with chamomile steam. Once everyone was settled, Mrs. Ramirez stood and tapped the candle holder. "On this day last year," she began softly, "our lives changed forever. But we are here today not to dwell on the tragedy, but to celebrate the lives we lost, especially those who cared for their families, like Daniel Evans. Clara, would you and Emily join me?" Clara rose, heart pounding, and took the candle from Mrs. Ramirez's hands. Emily stepped forward, her small hand slipping into her mother's. Together, they lit the taper and placed it upon a low pedestal by the window. Sunlight and flame danced together, casting flickering shadows across the gathered faces. A hush fell over the room. Clara swallowed hard, gathering her courage. She motioned to Emily. "Would you like to read your anniversary letter?" Emily nodded and moved to the front. Her voice wavered at first, then grew steady as she read. "Dear Daddy, it's been 1 whole year since you flew away. I've learned so much. How to ride my bike without training wheels, how to plant sunflowers, how to be brave, and even how to find joy in stories at the library. I miss you every day. Some days, the ache feels as big as the sky. But I also feel you with me, in the sunflowers that follow the light, in my laughter when I tell a joke, in the pages of your journal I read before bed. Thank you for teaching me to keep growing. I promise to carry your love forward today and always. Love, your Emily. Tears dripped from Clara's cheeks, and more than one guest dabbed their eyes with a tissue. In the gentle glow of the candle, the year's sorrow and growth merged into something luminous and unbreakable. When Emily finished, Mrs. Ramirez invited others to share memories. A neighbor spoke of Daniel's kindness when her car broke down. A Delta pilot recalled sharing coffee and conversation with him during his Atlanta layover. Grandma Louise described Daniel's mischievous grin when he surprised Emily with a homemade kite. Each story wove a tapestry of hope and humanity. After the sharing circle, Clara served tea and muffins, and the room filled with soft chatter. Children played quietly in the next room, trading sunflower stickers and drawing pictures of airplanes with smiling faces. Outside, the single sunflower seedling the committee had planted in the garden's central courtyard had grown into a small stalk, the first of many that would bloom next spring. By late afternoon, the gathering began to disperse. Guests hugged Clara and Emily, leaving behind tissue boxes, small vials of prayer, and fresh bouquets cut from autumnal gardens. As the door closed for the last time, Clara looked at Emily, whose cheeks were rosy with tears and laughter. "You were amazing today," Clara said, wrapping her arms around her daughter. Emily leaned into her. It felt like he was listening. Clara nodded, her eyes misty. He was. She guided Emily to the living room, where the tapers still flickered. "Would you like to blow out the candle together?" Emily stepped up and took the candle. She closed her eyes, drew in a shaky breath, and blew. The flame flickered once more, then settled into a gentle glow before extinguishing. For a long moment, the living room was silent, bathed in memory and possibility. Clara helped Emily place the letter and a pressed sunflower petal into the memory box by the journal. Together, they closed the lid and slid it beneath the bookshelf. That night, as Clara tucked Emily into bed, her daughter pressed her face into the pillow and sighed. "I'm glad we did this," she whispered. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." In the quiet that followed, mother and daughter drifted toward dreams in which Daniel stood beside them, hands on shoulders, guiding them toward the light, reminding them that even in absence, love endures. The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, painting the walls of the Evans home in soft pastels, a delicate reminder that each new day carries with it the promise of renewal. As Clara slipped into the hallway, she saw Emily seated on the bottom step of the staircase, cradling her rabbit plush and gazing wistfully at the framed photograph of the three of them at the beach, the one in which Daniel's arm was wrapped protectively around both of them. "Morning, sweetheart," Clara whispered, pausing beside her daughter. Emily looked up, her eyes bright and alert. "Morning, Mom. Can we go out to the garden?" Clara nodded. Though it was early, the air already carried the scent of fresh earth and blooming sunflowers. Together, they tiptoed downstairs, careful not to wake Grandma Louise, and stepped onto the back porch. The garden was awash in golden light. The tallest sunflowers, planted by Emily at the Memorial Garden, had sent up sturdy stalks in 3 small pots on the patio, tiny blooms opening toward the sun. In the central flower bed, the garden they'd planted the very first morning after the accident had long since become a riot of color: marigolds, daisies, petunias, and the newly arrived blue salvia that Clara had added the week before. Butterflies flitted among the blossoms, and bees hummed their lazy song. Emily ran her fingers along the petals of a deep orange marigold. "Look, Mom, these are taller than me now." Clara reached to straighten a drooping stem, smiling at how the garden had flourished under their loving care. "They are, just like you." She paused, her heart swelling. "Do you remember when we first planted these?" Emily nodded, eyes shining. "You read me the journal entries. I felt like Daddy was right there with us."
Clara knelt beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. He was, and he always will be. They spent the morning tending the garden together, deadheading spent blooms, watering dry soil, and carefully weeding around the sunflower seedlings that Emily had started from the seeds in her pocket. As they worked, they talked about the year ahead, Emily's upcoming fourth-grade play, Clara's plan to return part-time to work at the publishing house, and a mother-daughter camping trip they intended to take next spring. In those conversations lay the quiet reassurance that life, though forever changed by loss, can still move forward in hope and purpose. Each sentence reaffirmed their commitment to embrace new experiences, even as they carried Daniel's memory in their hearts. By midday, the garden stood immaculate, each plant cradled in rich soil, each flower head lifted proudly toward the sky. Emily ran her hand over the wooden bench at the center, the same oak seat where they'd shared their first morning planting sunflowers. "Shall we add something new?" Clara suggested. She reached into her tote bag and produced a small hand-painted birdhouse, blue with yellow trim, bearing Emily's name and the date of their anniversary ceremony. "Oh, it's perfect," Emily whispered, her face lighting up. Together, they found a sturdy branch overhead and hung the birdhouse. From the treetop, it rocked gently in the breeze, as if beckoning to every sparrow and bluebird within a mile. "That's where we'll tell our daily stories," Clara said softly. "Every morning, we can leave a little note inside about what we're grateful for." Emily hopped in excitement. "And maybe Daddy will hear our messages here." Clara hugged her daughter close. "I know he will." That afternoon, they invited Grandma Louise to join them for tea beneath the oak bench. Clara brewed chamomile, and Emily served tiny lemon tarts, her own creation, based on a recipe she'd found in Daniel's journal. As they sat together, they read the first entry in their new gratitude nest. October 16, 2019. "Today, I'm grateful for sunflowers that follow the light, for lavender that smells like hope, and for the love that binds our family beyond absence." Grandma Louise dabbed at her eyes. What a beautiful beginning. As the sun dipped low, Clara rose and gathered the empty cups. She looked back at the two women and realized how much they had rebuilt. A home filled with memory and laughter, a garden that bloomed brighter with each season, and a shared practice of gratitude that would bind them in years to come. That evening, after tucking Emily into bed, Clara opened Daniel's journal one last time. The final entries, once promises of future adventures, now served as a roadmap for the life she and her daughter would continue to lead. She placed a bookmark on the last page, kissed the cover, and closed the book, letting its weight rest on her lap. Stepping into the hallway, Clara saw Emily, eyes closed, clutching her rabbit. She leaned against the doorframe and whispered into the stillness, "Good night, Daddy. Thank you for teaching us how to grow." In the quiet that followed, Clara felt not emptiness, but fullness, memories entwined with hope, sorrow interwoven with love. The journey of grief had led them here, to a place where the past lived in harmony with the future, and where every sunrise offered an invitation to bloom again. As she turned off the light and closed the door, Clara knew that together they would continue to embrace tomorrow, rooted in the past, reaching ever upward toward the light.